If you have decided to disclose, there's a lot of different things to consider. The first is the why. Why am I sharing today? What's the goal of the conversation I'm about to have? Who am I sharing with? How am I going to share? And what's the reaction they might have? Carla, you've talked a bit about how sometimes you'll do this in writing and sometimes you'll do this in person. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more on your thought process
Over time,
on that.
I think ideally you always want to have a conversation with a person face to face, but that's not always possible, especially in a school setting as a parent, where you might be communicating with a lot of teachers and IEP teachers, principals, all the different people. And so over time, I've just sort of intuitively developed a sense of when I want to put things in writing and when I want to have a conversation, right? So if I'm talking with a person who I believe is interested in a learning curve and wants to ask questions and wants to learn more about Jessie and what challenges she might face in whatever setting, like say a teacher, I'll try to have a conversation, right? Because I want to have that back and forth and kind of that honest exchange of ideas. And I think that's a great way to build sort of a collaborative model. Like we're going to work together, we're going to be a team, we're going to try to help this story be really successful for Jessie. But there are times when I'm communicating with a person who, for whatever reason, I feel might either misremember or spin on a conversation we have, and I really want to have a hard record of what I've shared and said, and then I'm going to put that in writing. And then in the school setting, especially for parents, the IEP process often can be kind of overwhelming and challenging if you're going to get like an individual, I don't even know what education plan, right, to help support your student, or if you're going to have a 504 accommodation plan. There's going to be a lot of stuff written down. Yeah. I think it's important for me to put something in writing for that. I call it a positive student profile that allows me to kind of share and own Jessie's story. Yeah. And she's part of that as well. We'll put that together. So I'll put that in writing. It's sort of person to person, whether I decide, or I'll try to do both ways. I might put something in writing and then say, hey, let's talk about what I just sent you.
And by choosing in writing or conversation, you've done all of the things. You've considered what's the goal of our conversation and who I'm talking to, how am I going to do this, and what information is most relevant for me to share. That's great. In going through all of those different aspects of your decision, there's some questions you can ask yourself if you find that you're a little bit tripped up. The first is, will this help or hurt my loved one? The second is, will this help or hurt me? Have I included the relevant information needed given the goal of the conversation? And have I presented myself and my loved one with dignity? Troni, have you found yourself going through those questions when you need to share?
Yes, all the time. But I often wonder about what my brother's thoughts and feelings would be to what I've shared. Because he's not with me, I, again, ask myself, what would Justin say or do, given the opportunity? Sure. I'm an actor in a production called Pieces in My Own Voice, and I play the role of someone who lives with schizophrenia, the journey that they often go on when living with an illness like schizophrenia, and I'm really portraying my brother, telling his story. And with that opportunity, I really work on making sure that I stay true to who he was and not just the illness. Again, I'm also a parent with a child who has mental health challenges, but I don't share his story because I haven't been given permission to. And again, I think about when sharing, what is my goal, my why, who is the audience, and how they might, receive this information that I'm, or take in my story or our story,
It sounds like those questions of, is this going to help or hurt my loved one, and am I portraying them with dignity, is constantly resonating for you at the forefront of your brain.
It is.
Yeah. As Jesse's gotten older, Carla, I'm wondering if your response to am I portraying her with dignity in a way that's respectful to her has changed at all.
When Jessie was very little, I was really her voice. And it was like I was modeling how to share a story, right? And so then as she's gotten older, I too spend a lot of time. It's just a constant process of trying to figure out, am I presenting Jessie with respect? Am I giving dignity to her? Am I treating her as a whole person and not just a label? So I'm always thinking about that. And she and I talk about that as well. I mean, we try to be very transparent with her. So as she's gotten older, that process of identifying that zone that's respectful, that gives her dignity, has become less about me teaching her and more about her telling me, right? As she matures into her own voice. It's just been, it's a push and pull, your typical kind of power struggle of parents, but also then just learning to respect her voice, seeking permission, and then offering guidance, right? So I've written about this before that, she'll give me permission, and then there's always question in my mind. Did she just do that because I told her to? Right? Sure. Or has she learned a lesson and internalized some value that I have? And sometimes you don't know until afterwards whether you did the right thing or not. But for me, especially when she was in middle school, when she went through a super, super rough patch where her Tourette's really blossomed, and it was really obvious in classes that she was really struggling. We worked really hard to do some education in the classroom, and she participated in that. And there were huge conversations about this. Can we have Jessie come into the classroom, speak with students about the treatment course that she's on, about the challenges she faces, about the accommodations she needs? Can we do this in a way that allows her to still connect with her students? And we made huge connections that allowed her to walk out of that session feeling like, I have connected with my peers, I have found allies, I have found people who understand me that I didn't expect to understand me, but it was hard. And so now as she heads into her teen years, it becomes less and less about me and more about her speaking solo without me as much by her side whenever she wants to.
It sounds like for you and Jessie, keeping dignity at the forefront meant involving her more in the conversation. You weren't asking these questions to yourself anymore. It was, is this helping or hurting you, Jessie, when I share it this way or when I talk about it this way?
Mixed into the story about my daughter's dignity is also the question of my dignity, which is a very challenging process for me because I write. I think you understand that art and expression is a really important part of survival for me. And so we have this sort of back and forth where I feel like I am telling Jessie's story when I talk about her journey, but I'm also telling my story. And I have my own depression and anxiety that I cope with. And so we just continue to work on that balance on a day-to-day, that I also have the right to be heard and to share my story. And we just have to balance each other's needs. And we just walk side by side.
And we know that in sharing our stories and our journeys, we're not always going to get the feedback we want or the response we want. And when we have those experiences, it's important that we just re-say to them the purpose of our conversation. I thought you were going to be able to give me the support I needed. I know that based off of this evidence that I've collected. I'm sorry you weren't able to do that for me today. Have either of you experienced a situation like that? Troni's like, yes, absolutely.
Yes. I've been on stage before and performed in front of different audiences, pretty much taking them through the journey of someone who lives with schizophrenia. And all I could hear is hackling, response that was negative. But I also realized too that not everybody is ready to have that conversation or know how to. So I whether it's on stage or with an individual, I often take myself out of it, my feelings out of it, and just try to put myself in their shoes
Mhm.
and figure out, where is this coming from?
Yeah. And the modeling that you've done out of all of these sections that we've gone over, how you disclose, pros and cons to the different options of disclosure, all of that influences the story that for you, Jesse, or your children, or for you, your brother, if he was still with us, is telling themselves. And that's really what we're going to talk more about in the next video.